I'm spreading some of this corned beef mixture on. And then a little cheese. And I'm going to pop this onto the grill for 10 minutes or until the cheese is melted. So here we are. That is corned beef and cheese on toast. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Now, as you know, I recently completed a January food challenge. Boy, it was tough. We didn't even have the money in the budget to make use of a can of something in the larder that I'm going to show you today. Now, I think you'll agree that the Second World War was probably even tougher than we're having things now. Of course, the shortages, just like there were then, but back then the shortages were even more severe. And it went on for years, many more than the 5 years of the war. We're talking 1954 before meat came off the ration. Today, folks, I'm going to show you some corned beef recipes. This tin of corned beef costs £1.79 from Farm Foods. Now, corned beef can be as much as £3, £3.50 these days. Used to be a very cheap eat indeed. Even a few years ago it was a lot cheaper than it is now. Now, during the Second World War, corned beef made up 1/7 of the meat ration. No points coupons were needed to purchase corned beef from the butcher. It was part of the meat ration. As well as rationing, they had something called the point system, whereby you could buy extras maybe every month or so. Sausages were not on ration, but they were hard come by, so you might say use your points coupons to buy some sausages. Queues would be long though, and chances are by the time you got to your turn at the butcher's count they would have all been gone. Or you could have 8 pounds of lentils, which sounds more like the goings on in this household, to be perfectly honest. I get through loads of lentils. So let's see how many historical recipes from the 1940s I can create with this tin of corned beef here, shall we? The first recipe I'm going to create is a corned beef pie. I'm going to do a small pie for Dan, and I'll do a butter pie separately for myself. I've opened the tin. Now, I didn't refrigerate the can before opening it, and as you can see, a little bit of the meat has come away from the main block. I forgot, I will admit. It doesn't matter though. For this recipe, the corned beef is pretty much going to be mixed up in with potatoes and carrot and onion. I'll cut a piece off the block. I'll put both bits on a plate, and then we will make some pastry. This is going to be a 1940s pastry. The recipe I'm demonstrating is especially for Grow Joyfully Home and Garden. So Sherry, I hope you like this. You don't need much. 1 slice is enough. I'll put the canned corned beef now to one side in the refrigerator until I start the next recipe. I'm going to just chop this up. As you can see, it's flaking. Now, actually, this texture is perfect if you're going to make a corned beef sandwich, because you can spread it over the bread rather than slice it, so it will go a bit further. This amount with some pickle mixed in would probably feed 2 people. Into a bowl goes 6 ounces of plain or all-purpose flour. Now, if you don't have ounces, which is an imperial measurement, this is an old-fashioned recipe, I will put on the screen the conversion so it's easy for you. But we're using the 6 ounces of plain flour, a pinch of salt and 3 ounces of lard and butter. You don't have to use lard, you can use some other shortening, but I find you get a really nice pastry. This is how my nan used to make it. You can use baking margarine if you don't want to use butter. My nan used to use stork, but as stork isn't easily come by these days, I'm using unsalted butter. Here is 3 ounces of a mixture of unsalted butter and lard, and that's going into the bowl along with the flour. A pinch of salt. We're using the rubbing in method. Now, if you don't want to be old-fashioned, you can do it in a food processor. But I like to do it the old-fashioned way. So just rub it through the fingers from a height. We want it to resemble fine breadcrumbs. There we go. And then we're using ice cold water. We're adding it slowly, a little at a time, just to bring everything together. If you want to add some dried herbs to the crust, you can do so. It will give the pastry an interesting flavour. But I think if you're hedging your bets and you're thinking of making something sweet, then it's best to leave it well alone. You don't want the dough to be too wet. When you get to the point where you think you've added enough water, bring it together with your hand. Now then, the colder your pastry is, the better it will perform. This is the whole purpose of adding ice cold water rather than just say tap water or room temperature. You see, that's a nice smooth ball. If you're in a hurry, you could use it straight away. In that case, put the dough on a floured board. Knead very gently and then roll and use. But I find it always benefits from resting. So I'm going to wrap it up in greaseproof paper and put it in the fridge for about half an hour. Alternatively, you can put it, say, in cling film or plastic wrap and then put it in the fridge. I find pastry always rolls a lot better if it's nice and cold. Now it's time to roll out this pastry. I'm going to cut half the pastry off. Get it in the flour. Don't forget to flour your rolling pin, and let's roll. Do you see how beautifully that rolls? Look at that. Now you can do thick pastry, I prefer it thinner. It's entirely up to you. Once these pies are assembled, they will be going in the fridge and then into the freezer. The fridge helps them to firm up a little. It saves you from open freezing. I'm using this plate just as a guide. Set aside the pastry bits. They will be put to good use. There we go, that's nice. Roll the pastry around your pin and then place it in your dish. These pie dishes have been greased. You can use oil, you can use butter, but of course it helps stop the pastry sticking to the side of the pie tin. There we go. Don't worry, there's some holes, you can patch them up. I'm quite happy with that, that's quite good. Press everything into the corners really well. And there's your pie base. I'm using the trimmings and a little more of the dough to make the next pie base. You see how far that amount of pastry goes? There's plenty to make a decent sized pie if you don't want a little pie. This is the butter pie. Now I'm going to assemble the corned beef pie. I'm putting a little chopped carrot and potato in the bottom. And I'll put in some onion. I'm going to put in some herbs. We don't need salt because the corned beef has salt in. I'm going to add some white pepper. And now we have the corned beef. Now this is one reasonably thick slice of corned beef. What I'm going to do is pack the pie as tightly as possible with the corned beef. There's a little bit of corned beef left, so I'll be using that for supper tonight. I've also got some cold leftover gravy. It's beef gravy, so I'll add a little of that as well for moisture. Now I'm going to do a couple of lids. The first lid I'm going to do is for my pie. I usually have codes for the different pies. Sometimes I'll write down the initial on his. Damp the edges of the pie. You can use a pastry brush, but this works just as well. Roll your pastry over the rolling pin as you did before and place it on top. Lovely job. And now we can trim the edges. I've pinched the edges on mine and I'm going to put in a letter C. So that's mine. And that can now go in the refrigerator just to firm up, and then it will go in the freezer. Let's repeat the process for Dan's pie. Now I'm going to put a cross in the middle like that. Bring the pie over here, just pop it on. You can clearly see what type of pie it is. Again, I've moistened the edges of the pie tin. I'll just crimp the edges a little. And there we go, that's Dan's pie. With the last of the pastry, I'm going to make an apple turnover for dessert tonight. So I'll leave this recipe there and we'll look at the next one. It would have been my dad's birthday, he would have been 86. So I'm going to do one of his favourite meals. I'm doing corned beef hash. He also really liked corned beef sandwiches. We're using a teacup full of corned beef, which is what the 1940s recipe states. This is a recipe from the Second World War. I'm doing the British version. The American version of corned beef hash, you use raw diced potatoes. The British version is cooked. But do you see, this is all we need. I've got the little bit of corned beef that I had left over from the previous recipe. And I'm just filling the cup now with a couple of slices of corned beef. There's still plenty in that. And that's going to go back in the fridge for the next recipe. I'll chuck in some diced onion and cook that off for probably 3 or 4 minutes. The onions are getting nice and soft. I'm going to tip in a load of vegetables. Now, when I was growing up, Mum used to do her version of corned beef hash, which was really corned beef and vegetables. So she'd do vegetables in the pressure cooker and then mash it up and then add some corned beef. But I'm doing a normal corned beef hash. Mum wanted to give us something that was healthy and not fried, which is why she tended to do it in the pressure cooker. It was always very tasty though. It was one of our favourite meals. We didn't have much money growing up. In those days, corned beef was really, really cheap. Now, if you can't afford a tin of corned beef, you can actually create probably one dish from 4 corned beef slices that you get from Iceland for £1 in the fresh section with the other charcuterie. This is going to be cooking off for quite a while. I'm going to carry on bashing these potatoes to chop them up a bit more finely. And the broccoli. And then I'll add the corned beef. This is chopped more finely now. I mean, you could do this before you put it in the pan if you wanted to. But we've been quite busy this evening. I'm in a bit of a hurry. I'm going to add some white pepper. I like white pepper with potato. It gives you an extra pizzazz. My nan always used white pepper in potatoes. It's just got a bit of je ne sais quoi. And of course you use white pepper in Chinese food as well. This would normally feed 4 people. There's plenty there for 4 people if you have bread and butter. We're not having bread and butter, but there probably will be some leftovers. I'm going to chuck in the teacupful of corned beef. I'm going to mix that through and try and distribute it as evenly as possible. The idea is that if there was 4 of you, everybody would get some. This is a really cheap meal. You see how little corned beef we've used. Remember, there was often only about 4 ounces per person meat ration during the Second World War. And if, as an emergency prepper, you've got food shortages, then your tin of corned beef can go a long way. I was at the little Tesco this morning getting some loo rolls, and a lot of the shelves were empty. And, well, most of them know about the farmers' blockades. I was talking to the cashier today about it. I'm going to leave that now for about half an hour. A crust will form on the base. I'm going to cover it with a tin plate and just turn the heat down to the minimum and just let it cook away slowly. There we go. That'll do its thing now. We can just leave that. This is how it looks after half an hour. So I'm going to dish some up today. You see how it's nice and crispy on the bottom? There, look. That's what you call a corned beef hash. Any leftovers, we can have maybe a corned beef cake or something. So, do you want to give that a try?
Yes. Looks lovely. Gorgeous.
Excellent.
Not the crunchy bits.
Well, that's recipe number 2. Well, this is recipe number 3. I'm going to do a corned beef cheese on toast thingy for Dan. I have 1 slice of corned beef, literally 1 slice, and I'm going to mix that with the tomato and toast the bread. And then once the bread's toasted, pop on the corned beef and a little grated cheese and put under the grill until everything is bubbly. So I'm mixing 1 little cherry tomato. It said skin it. However, it's only a tiny cherry tomato. I don't really think it matters. Now, by rights, you should add Worcestershire sauce to this, but we have none. I'm going to add a little tiny squirt of brown sauce instead. If you don't have brown sauce or Worcestershire sauce or even any tomatoes, just mix the corned beef with a little bit of tomato ketchup. Now, this recipe is from 1948. By 1948, rations were in a really sorry state, and people were really fed up with the rationing as well by this time. But the government just said, oh, just get on with it, hurry up and get on with it. There was a big strike at the port of Southampton, and 200 ships were affected. The ships that were bringing food into the country from overseas. And already the fresh meat rations were tight, but the government saw fit to reduce rations to 6d, which is 2p in today's money. Therefore, the only alternative was corned beef, because of course that was on the meat ration. So there was a lot of recipes invented around this time, or created, if you like to use that word, that would add a bit of corned beef protein to one's meal. I know it doesn't look very attractive, but I can assure you it will taste perfectly fine, and Dan will probably give us his verdict. There we go. And actually, this is a really good method of making a little bit of corned beef go further. So you don't need to buy 4 slices of corned beef from Iceland, and inevitably the slices that tend to stick together so you can't separate them. All you need is the tin of corned beef. Just take off 1 normal slice and then mash it all together, and it will go far. I've grated just a little bit of cheddar. It's a fine grater, so it looks more than there actually is. Dan will be having one of these smallish slices of sourdough. This is brown sourdough with no added folic acid. And we'll be getting that spread on it first, and then a bit of the cheese, and then I'll eat some of the cheese. I'll have cheese on toast. The first thing I'm going to do though with these is shove them in the toaster. Now, probably in the 1940s, most people would have just used the eye-level grill on a cooker. We don't have an eye-level grill. Most cookers these days don't have such things. So I'll let those toast. I'm spreading some of this corned beef mixture on. And then a little cheese. And we're going to pop this onto the grill for 15 minutes or until the cheese has melted. So here we are. That is corned beef and cheese on toast. And I literally used half a slice of corned beef. Can you believe it? Enjoy, babe.
I will do. It's really nice, like a wartime pizza.
So that's recipe number 3. Well, let's talk about recipe number 4. Recipe 4 is another recipe from the Second World War, and it's potato pancake. However, it contains no eggs. Let's discuss what it says in Marguerite Patton's book. Let's talk about warming food. It isn't only hot meals that warm, although of course they are very comforting. There are foods that stoke your inner fires, and happily 3 of the chief of them are cheap and easy to get. They are potatoes, oatmeal, which was soon to become more plentiful, and national wheatmeal bread. These are also important health protectors. Carrots too have some warmth-giving value, and they protect against colds and chills. Carrots also help you to see in the dark. Now, the recipe for potato and corned beef pancake is self-explanatory. Instead of using egg though, we're using milk. We're going to be using a measurement of milk that isn't used these days, and it's called a gill, which is about 140 millilitres. You can use 3/4 to 1 gill of milk or household milk. So 3/4 of a gill is about 105 millilitres. Well, we'll go with 100 because it's easy. This is going to be for Dan to take to work tomorrow. He'll be eating it cold, but it should help to keep him full. He's staying at his mum's tomorrow night. He's also got a healthy salad, and he's got a bit of chicken broth left. So let's get started. This recipe is actually from Second World War America. It's similar to an American corned beef hash, except in that you would be using raw diced potatoes, not cooked. In a bowl the potatoes, and there's 1 breakfast cup there of corned beef, which again, as you know, is only about 1 thick slice. Although corned beef is quite salty, we're going to put a good sprinkling of black pepper and a good pinch of salt. Let's make this a little more interesting with some mixed dried herbs, which is my addition. I always go for lots of flavour, and then mix everything together really well. I've measured out 100 ml of milk, and I'm stirring 1 teaspoon of ghee. It can be other clarified fat, and that's gone in a frying pan. That didn't take very long, did it? That's warmed through. So now what we do is we turn in the corned beef and potatoes right through the milk. And then we're just going to dot a couple more teaspoons of ghee, or you can use dripping, over the top. And we're going to put a plate over the top of the pan and let it cook on the low heat for about half an hour. Well, this looks ready, folks, so let's see if I can turn it out. You see, it's all nice and crispy there on the bottom. Look at that. It's not come out all in one big piece, but it's nice and crispy underneath there. And I'm going to put it in a box for him and then put it in the fridge when it's cold. So there we are, folks. This is a potato and corned beef pancake. 1940s American style. Well, another day, another meal with the same tin of corned beef. This is recipe number 5, and it's a corned beef stew. Now this can be frozen. It might even get a nice mashed potato topping, and then we can call it a corned beef cottage pie and still bung it in the freezer. Whenever you've got some spare time and you're in the mood to cook, it's always a good idea, because inevitably there's going to come a day when you just don't feel like cooking. And the whole thing is, if the food tastes really good, it means that the food has been cooked with love and happiness. We all need to put intent into whatever we are creating. If you cook food when you're not in a very good mood, or you really don't want to do it, then the food won't taste as good as when you put your love and care and attention into it, and some joy and happiness. This is another recipe from around 1948, when they were having that dock strike. I have chopped up some vegetables. We've got some leek, a little bit of garlic, a potato, just a medium potato, and 2 carrots. Into the pan goes the leek and the garlic. I've drizzled a little olive oil in the pan. It's over a low to medium heat. You can use dripping if you prefer, or butter, or ghee, or lard. In the 1940s it would probably have either been a little margarine, or probably dripping, or lard. We're just cooking the rawness out of the garlic and the leek. Now I've added the carrot and potato. There's a little bit of moisture in those leeks because I added a touch of water to stop them browning. I've seasoned the mixture with a little salt, plenty of black pepper, and some dried herbs. And now I'm going to add some stock. I have some vegetable water, and I'll top it up with some chicken stock. Let that simmer away now for about 15 to 20 minutes, or until the vegetables are tender. If you want to turn it into a Jamaican style stew, you could add some marrow fat peas or some kidney beans, and whatever spices of your choice, but definitely a little bit of chilli. I think some jerk seasoning would go quite well. Look at this. This is terrific, isn't it? This is what we've got left out of that tin, so it's going to make a really good stew. I'm going to chop this up now, and I've checked the vegetables are still not tender. I'll just chop this up and set it aside. I'll add it shortly. Right folks, I think we're ready for the corned beef. Look at all this. As you can see, a lot of the liquid has now evaporated. This is perfect. Mush everything up and stir everything together. The corned beef will naturally thicken the sauce. You could make a cowboy stew if you like. Just add maybe half a can of baked beans if you've got any open, or you could add tomatoes. This is very versatile. Check the seasoning, but as canned beef tends to be quite salty, you want to go easy on the salt. I only added a tiny little bit to the potatoes and carrots and leek and garlic. If you don't have leek, use onion. During the war, leek was easier to come by quite often than onions. So here we are. Everything is nicely thickened. I'm going to set that aside now, and when it's cold I'll pop it in a freezer pouch and put it in the freezer. So here is the lovely corned beef stew. Doesn't that look great? Well folks, those are my 5 corned beef recipes. It's amazing to think we created so many dishes from one tin of canned beef. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please comment. What do you think of these historical recipes? I think people were very versatile in the 1940s and the post-war period. They were certainly frugal with whatever they had. Please share and subscribe, ding the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon for another one. Till then, bye for now and happy cooking.